and something that we've sought to remedy, especially in this last session. And at times we see ourselves getting closer and closer, but there's always something that prohibits a lot of that growth that we seek to implement here in the city of Milwaukee. One of the bigger things that we're going to talk about halfway through the presentation is the Transform Milwaukee plan, which was what a lot of people saw as a last-ditch effort by the governor during the recall to try to get a modicum of support in the Milwaukee area, where he proposed a $100 million investment, specifically targeting the 30th Street corridor and other blighted areas of the city. But what happened there is we saw the money, the funds that were intended for this certain area not necessarily be spent in that area. And the focus shifted a lot from Central City, North Side, more urban areas, the more blighted areas, the more problematic areas of the city, or troubled areas, I should say, instead of problematic, of the city, to more so in the Third Ward, Menominee Valley, which is important, which is good. But however, with that focus lost, it's hard to see when the state will take a real focused approach in remedying some of the situations in that area. And we look back even before the governor took office, one of the biggest abuses, and specifically related to the 30th Street corridor, was with Talgo, the plant that had the Spanish train manufacturer that was situated at the former A.O. Smith site. And this was, it created a glimmer of hope that the Talgo plant, because we saw restoration, we saw other people begin to take an interest into the area, an area that had somewhat been forgotten about, a destitute area. We saw a manufacturer come in, and people were working jobs. There were jobs that people were working, and when the governor decided that he did not want high-speed rail, we saw those jobs lost. And the chance that Milwaukee saw to really revitalize an area was seemingly lost. And it was sort of a slap in the face, not only to the people who had worked so hard, but the employees who were working, many of whom had been laid off, a lot who had previously worked at either A.L. Smith or Tower and had the experience. And they finally saw remnants of an industry coming back to the city of Milwaukee, and they had a chance to use skill sets that they had acquired and skill sets that would be beneficial when it came to manufacturing those train cars. We saw them being able to put those skills to use. And when the governor made the decision, when the governor-elect made the decision that this was a plan that he was going to cancel, we certainly saw a lot of that die, a lot of that wither away. So what I want to talk about today is Milwaukee's urban agenda and battling inequality. And when we talk about inequality across the entire state, whether it's income inequality, education disparities, the focal point, your hotspot for those instances of inequality are going to be in the city of Milwaukee, unfortunately. Now, a little bit of background about myself. I was born and raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I left for college and I went to Alabama A&M University, and I made my way back in 2009. Once I finished college, I worked on a campaign, and once that campaign was over after college, I came back home to Milwaukee because Milwaukee is a very important place to me, and I couldn't be more proud than I am to represent the city of Milwaukee, a large portion of the north side of the city of Milwaukee, the neighborhood that I spent the majority of my life representing that area in the legislature. It's very important to me, and it's very important. People ask, well, why didn't you run for the county board? Why didn't you run for city council if Milwaukee is your focal point? And I felt that Milwaukee really needs as many strong voices as possible in the state legislature. And I feel that now is the time. In the 2012 primary elections, I think we saw a lot of people that had that same commitment that I share to the city of Milwaukee be elected to the state legislature and be voices, and not just be voices, but be innovators problem solvers, people who are really willing to work to get the job done. And so without further ado, I guess I'll go ahead and go into the PowerPoint presentation without too much introduction or without further introduction. So again, Milwaukee, the urban agenda, battling inequality. How about myself, State Representative Mandela Barnes. Thank you all for joining me. So let's go into this. So on the first slide, we see a growing statewide income gap. And as you can read, the census trends show that for Wisconsin workers, income has fallen for low-income groups as they significantly increase for the top percent of income earners. This isn't something that's specific to Milwaukee. It's a nationwide epidemic. Income inequality being one of the biggest issues, in my opinion, the civil rights issue of today. Growing income equality limits so much more for lower income families and people who are living in poverty, especially people who are working and still living in poverty. It's a huge problem that has residual effects on a person's health, the health of their children, as well as educational outcomes, which is something that we're going to get to a little bit later in the slide. We're going to talk about the effects of poverty on education, which is too often left out of the conversation of education, quote unquote, reform. You cannot reform education if we don't reform a person's living situation, a student's living situation, of the family structure, the accessibility for those children. So on this table, again, you guys will have a copy of this. So I won't read everything on the chart with the average income in '96 and the average income in 2010 and the change from 1996 to 2010. So over a 14-year span, you see what the bottom 40% and the richest 1% and the change in adjusted gross income. This is all expressed in 2012 dollars, not 1996 dollars. So if you look at the average change per year, you saw the bottom 40% grow at a rate of $172 per year, and the richest 1% at $12,055 per year. So that's the stark comparison that we see when we talk about income inequality. This is nearly 10 times as much, about 9 times as much. So there's no way that if we continue growth for the richest 1% at this rate and the slow rate of growth for the bottom 40% of people at this rate, that any sort of economy can sustain itself, because the bottom 40% are, as we all know, the spenders, the people who have to spend every dime of every paycheck that they receive every week, biweekly, monthly, however often, however frequently a person is compensated for their work. All of that money goes right back into the economy. The richest 1%, as we know, a lot of this money is either in savings, been put away for a rainy day, whatever the case may be. But the fact of the matter is, if the bottom 40% does not have money to spend, to pump back into our economy, then there is no way that not only Milwaukee, not only the state of Wisconsin, but the entire country economically can sustain itself. So I'm going to go on to the next slide with the bar graph with the increasing income equality while the bottom falls behind. Again, this is just another visual for the change in adjusted gross income, by income group from '96 to 2010. Let you guys look at the same information, just different format. And this is from the Wisconsin Department of Revenue for all 2010 filers, ordered by income, presented in fifths of income distribution. We'll go on to the next slide, and we're going to zero in Milwaukee. So if you look at the quick facts, the data from 2012, the city of Milwaukee's per capita income, just over $19,000, is well below the state level of just over $27,000. That's over $8,000 in individual income for each Wisconsin or each resident in the city of Milwaukee that they don't see compared to their average outside of Milwaukee neighbor. And so the average family income in the city of Milwaukee at $54,000 compared to the $80,000, almost $81,000 state average. 23.6% of Milwaukee families still fall below the poverty line, while the state reported only 8.4%. Now, this is a clear indicator right here where you see the city of Milwaukee is almost 3 times more impoverished than the rest of the state of Wisconsin. And we see the disparity between working families, average incomes by Milwaukee zip codes to the right. And that shows a picture of wealth segregation as the bottom incomes are demographically, are typically more demographically African American areas. So we'll look at the Milwaukee County average of $60,000, and you look at the 53206 zip code, which is the lowest earning zip code in the city of Milwaukee, at $20,000. And this is for household. This is for a family, mind you. And you look at the 53172 in Milwaukee, or South Milwaukee, at $56,000. This is nearly, or even West Dallas in 53227, and the Milwaukee County average, again, that's $60,000 compared to the 53206 zip code, where that family average is $20,000. This means that, we all know math, and that's 1/3 of the Milwaukee County average. So if we're having earnings of 1/3 of the average of Milwaukee County and specific zip codes, and this is where you're going to see a lot of the other issues. I wish I had another chart that I could compare side by side that also had the crime statistics, the areas that are more prone to crime in the same graph form with the same zip codes, as well as educational achievement. And I could guarantee you that the 3 graphs would be identical. I hate that I didn't get a chance to put those in here, but if I did have those graphs, you would not be able to see much difference between the 3 if we go by income, educational attainment, or educational achievement, academic performance, what have you, and neighborhoods that are more prone to crime. These are all residual effects of income inequality and poverty as a whole. So if we go to the next slide, visualizing the racial link, and this is a map that I've seen many times before. Some of you on here may have also seen this map, but it shows the African American population in Milwaukee on the left side, and the household income distribution in Milwaukee on the right side. I may have said it right twice. Please forgive me. African American population in Milwaukee on the left side, household income distribution on the right. And if you look, the darker green areas on the left, you see how, we know how segregated the city of Milwaukee is, but when you look at the concentration of darker green, which indicates 75% more African American population centered right in the central pocket here in the city of Milwaukee. But if we look at the we look at the map on the right, we look at the income, and the darker green, the more money, the lighter areas, the less money. So where the area is dark green on the left map, it is far less green on the right map, indicating that the money that is typically spent by people living in the dark green area is somehow not coming back to the area on the household income distribution map. And I'll give you guys a second to kind of check that out. I had to look a few times to try to find at least one dark green zip code or one dark green area on the left map, and I tried to find one that matched on the right map, and I did not find that. Maybe you will. If anyone else sees that, please let me know. I'm having a little trouble on that one. So just and when you get the chance to look at it in map form, someone can tell you the statistics, someone can recite the data as much as they want, but when the visual is here in front of you, when you actually see the racial data coupled with the income data, then sometimes, or at that point, it becomes a little more apparent to a lot of people. And this is actually, I need to get these printed off myself and keep these in my office when I visit other legislators and I talk about income disparities and how we need to go about remedying some of these situations. And when we talk about raising the minimum wage, when we talk about living wages, but for a little bit later down in the PowerPoint. So recently, there's a report that was released that showed Wisconsin as being America's worst state for Black children by the Annie E. Casey Foundation. Wisconsin dead last, no one below us. We can talk about the entire state, whether it's job creation, new business startups, and business growth. A lot of the same points that I use when I make my case about the direction that the state is headed. And those indicators will put us at 37th in job creation, 45th in job growth, 48th in new business startups. But this particular category, which is a category that I'm clearly specifically interested in, not only being a legislator from inner city Milwaukee, but a legislator who I do chair the state's legislative Black and Latino caucus. So with America being the worst state for Black children, it's an issue that as a state legislator, there's not a way that it's an issue that I can ignore. For whatever reason, whatever reason, Wisconsin may be the worst state in the country for Black children. And the ranking was based on the 12 different metrics, ranging from educational opportunities to home life. And home life would include one of the previous points, which is the income. There's the quality of home life is diminished with each level of decreasing income. If you look at the quality home life for a person who has food insecurity, a person who has resource insecurity or energy insecurity, everybody who lives below the poverty line, or everyone who lives in a certain situation may not have access, whether it's energy assistance, whether it's worrying about your lights being cut off during the summer. And when you have so many children in the city of Milwaukee who live in poverty, you will see the fact that they don't have access to health care as they should, which affects the learning process, which everything is connected. The income is directly connected to the and I wouldn't use educational opportunity actually in the second bullet point here. Educational opportunity, I would use another term. I would probably instead put educational achievement or the educational attainment. And I talked earlier today. There was a report released about different voucher and charter schools and their performance, but it talked much more about poverty and the health aspects, the correlation to health. When you look at children who are in poverty are more likely to have poor vision than children who live in middle class families, and clearly much more likely to have vision problems than students in upper class families. But the fact is, without that access to healthcare, every child unfortunately doesn't have access to see an eye doctor, to be prescribed a pair of glasses. And if you're a student with poor eyesight, then the chances are you're going to be a poor reader. As well as students who are hungry, it's going to be hard for you to focus if you're a student who hasn't had breakfast, if you're a student who hasn't had meals. Even as adults, it's hard for us to concentrate if we haven't eaten. It's hard for us to concentrate if we haven't had our coffee. And for families living in poverty, coffee is clearly a luxury. It's not something that is, and the things we take for granted aren't also readily available, specifically to the people in the darker areas on the map on the slide I showed you before. So we'll go back to attacking Milwaukee from the Capitol. And again, one of the main reasons that prompted me, one of the biggest one of the biggest issues facing the entire state was the constant attacks on the city of Milwaukee, which is a reason, again, why I ran for office. And you look at the public schools being weakened, and the governor will talk about the $100 million tax relief, which is nothing in comparison to the $800 million that was taken away in 2011. And unfortunately, so many people seem to have forgotten that that happened, but we haven't forgotten. And our public school systems are still suffering as a result. There are schools in the district that I represent that I've visited who are not getting the books that they need for all of their students. There are schools that don't have the support staff that they need, schools that haven't been able to hire counselors. And people may think, oh, well, counselors, you don't necessarily need that. We need to make sure that we have more teachers in the classroom. Yeah, until you deal with the schools that are in those darker green areas in the map, the schools that are dealing with the highest rates of poverty is where you'll see the students who are dealing with the most severe issues, who need extra support that a teacher can't necessarily provide for that student. And I talk about this story all the time, and I'll talk about it until I'm blue in the face. But I spoke once with a principal in the district that I represented a school, and she said that she walked the halls one day, as she usually does, as most good principals do, and there was a student sitting outside of the classroom, and he was sitting outside, and she, of course, asked him why was he sitting outside of the class, and he said his teacher put him out. And when she asked him why, he said he didn't know. So the principal went into the classroom, and she asked the teacher, and she said, "Well, why'd you put the student out?" And the teacher said that, well, the student has been asleep in my class, and this isn't the first time. And so the principal took the student to the office, and she started to ask questions. And why are you sleepy? Why haven't you been able to? Why are you sleeping in class? And the student said that he was not able to sleep, and he is not often able to sleep. And she asked why, and she said, well, there's traffic. There's just people all the time at his house. There's just at all times of the night. And it come later after just asking enough questions, the principal found out that this student is living in a drug house. And in living in this drug house, all times of night, every night of the week, there are people in and out. There's noise. There's likely violence. And this is a student who's obviously feeling the effects of his home situation. And in feeling those effects, you see that this is obviously a child who's not going to be getting A's, B's, maybe not even C's on their report card. This is a student who is going to be graded poorly because of his performance. But the household situation would not be taken into account, and not to make excuses, because this is a situation, this is a barrier, this is a hurdle. It's a barrier to education that, unfortunately, this is not the only student that faces that same barrier. And the fact of the matter is, we have to, as a city, as a state, Milwaukee County, just as a community, have to be able to come together and find ways to address this situation, because this is not the fault of any teacher. This is not the fault of any principal, of any school system. These are the effects that take place in the home situation, or the door-to-door, as I like to call it, because it's between the doors of the school and between the doors of the home, where there is no control by the school district, and righteously there probably shouldn't be, unless we are able to put together a model that brings together resources from the neighborhood, resources from businesses, resources from nonprofit groups that are in the surrounding areas, that are in a certain radius of the school, that can work to provide resources, whether it's to families or to students, not just from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., but after school or before school. So I guess I'll go back to the attack in Milwaukee from the Capitol, and we'll look at the certain restrictions on voting rights that will disproportionately affect minorities, disproportionately affect the city of Milwaukee. With uniform early voting laws, we'll see Milwaukee, a city of 600,000 people, with the same voting laws as a town of 3,000 people, or even less. Whatever the smallest municipality in the city or in the state of Wisconsin, Milwaukee would have uniform early voting laws as those other municipalities. And in 2012, there was a ballot processed on average of every 9 seconds by the city of Milwaukee. What these new voting laws will do is create a backlog in an area that produces the highest Democratic turnout in the entire state. And it's all by design. And there was I was glad to work with Representative Sandy Pash, outgoing Representative Sandy Pash, on an amendment that would have created more locations for early voting. Because not only will this create the backlog, not only is weekend voting a thing of the past now, the fact is a person living on the edge of the city of Milwaukee, a person living at like the Menominee Falls border, who would have to travel by bus to get downtown to vote after a workday, could see up to a 2-hour commute round trip. So if you look at someone who gets off work 5 o'clock, it's 2 hours out of that person's day just because he or she wanted to go exercise their constitutional right to vote. And this is the type of impact that the kind of hassle that the majority party has purposely created in the city of Milwaukee to deter voters, to deter potential voters, people who would not vote for them. And we've seen this play out since the introduction of voter ID laws in the state, or since we've seen an influx of voter restriction laws. We've seen the majority party just try to eliminate the vote of people who won't necessarily vote for them. We've seen the numbers with Tammy Baldwin winning her seat in the U.S. Senate. It was even before that, when President Barack Obama won, we saw just across the nation how states reacted, and states were in a rush to implement voter restriction laws. And as more people, as our nation grows, as our state grows, we see a changing demographic, a demographic that does not agree with the majority party. So the only way to hold on to that majority is to eliminate the influence of the people who do not agree with their platform. And that's what's happening. And so I'll get back to my points. Please forgive me, but we have the number of 80,000 people kicked off Badger Care because of a partisan decision to not accept the federal Medicaid expansion. And across the country, we see members of Congress who repeatedly attempt to repeal the Affordable Care Act. The United States is the only industrialized nation that saw millions of its own residents, millions of health. And we saw people, as we all know, who have been rejected because of lifetime limits, people who have been rejected for health care, people who have been rejected because of pre-existing conditions. And we all know the job market as well. So people who graduate from college don't always get a job right away. And so now people who are 26 years old can still stay under their parents' insurance, which is a very fortunate thing. And nobody should go into debt. Nobody should face income insecurity because of accidents that may happen that cause healthcare dilemmas for them. And then finally, we see the no follow through on Transform Milwaukee. I guess I would edit that portion also. There has been follow through. The focus has just been lost on Transform Milwaukee, as I spoke about a little bit earlier. And again, we saw the massive cuts to public education, the 11-12 budget, the low spending level maintained in 13 to 14. 2013 and 4 to be a 14. But we saw tax cuts that benefited higher income wage earners, and we see not all schools being held to the same standards and accountability. And it's easy to look at different schools on paper to measure what schools are making the grade and what schools are not making the grade. But when the fact of the matter is, if your school is able to more easily rid itself of troubled students, of students who are lower performing, then it's sort of like you can create your own achievement score. You can create your own grade. So local control no more. This session, and it's funny to me all the time. I have to laugh that the majority party has the audacity to call itself the party of local control, because we saw that to not be the case more than ever this session. We saw the state legislature vote to decimate the Milwaukee County Board of Supervisors, the Milwaukee County Board specifically. We saw the residency requirements for the city of Milwaukee employees being taken away, which is a measure that was stuck into the budget. We saw the voter restriction bills that I spoke earlier, and we saw redistricting, the shift to power Republican suburbs and towns. And we also saw attempts to preempt the living wage ordinance that was passed by the Milwaukee County Board of Supervisors. This was something that the majority party again saw. The bill was introduced by a person who is not from the city of Milwaukee, who does not even represent a portion of Milwaukee County, say, all right, well, I don't like what Milwaukee is doing here. I don't like what Milwaukee County, that radical board of Milwaukee County supervisors who wants to pay people a living wage. I don't like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce a bill that will preempt any county from enacting living wage ordinances. And Dane County had previously had one for some time now. The city of Milwaukee even has one. It's a little bit lower. It's higher than minimum wage, but it's still just a little lower than Milwaukee County's living wage. However, it's been in place for some time now. So go ahead. Again, to the Transform Milwaukee promise broken. The $100 million was promised by the governor in 2012, again, at the final stages of the recall election, as a last-ditch effort. A year later, still $75 million short. And the money, again, as I spoke about, has been shifted away from the areas of high need into special interest projects. But I mean, some of the money, I can honestly say, again, if we look at the Water Council and what's going on there in the Third Ward, it's a focal point. It is a bright and shining star for the city of Milwaukee to lead innovation in the country and across the world. Freshwater science, it is giving Milwaukee the chance to be a global leader. And while I'm very critical of the way the Transform Milwaukee program is played out, I could not, in good faith, not acknowledge what's going on with the Milwaukee Water Council. Unfortunately, it's concentrated more so in an area, not necessarily not in need, but the areas that were in need have still been neglected. So the promise has still been broken. The 30th Street corridor is still is still very blighted. It's still very derelict in many areas, and it's something that I've challenged the governor on from day one since I was elected. I said, well, I did have a sit down with the governor, and I said that I'm very skeptical of Transform Milwaukee, but this is your plan. And if you say it's going to work, if you say this is going to be the case, then we're going to work. Well, let's make it happen. Let's see what happens. And again, 1 year later, we are still $75 million short, and the targeted area has been somewhat forgotten. And so again, we have here Governor Walker tiptoes away from Wisconsin. This was supposed to be a GIF image that didn't play like it was supposed to. So you guys got to forgive me on that. It didn't play. It was supposed to be pretty funny. Uh, but let's go ahead and go to the next one. And so, sorry, it's just a picture of me. But working towards solutions, job preparation. Again, strong public education, strengthening not only MPS but all public schools across the entire state, specifically targeting. And there was a bill introduced that fortunately it died. It would have instructed the takeover of many schools across the state and virtually the majority of schools in the city of Milwaukee. And they used triggers of the lowest two tiers in the grading system for all schools. And charter schools would have had I believe, an 8-year exemption, and I forget the exemption for voucher schools. However, they would have predated the MPS requirements. So the schools who had fell into the lowest two categories for 3 consecutive years would have been taken over by an education operator. So what this would have done is would have backlogged 2 years. So the schools in Milwaukee that were considered low performing would have only had 1 year left to be graded. And again, when we talk about the way our schools are graded and what constitutes a failing school is where the majority of students aren't making the grade. A majority of students are receiving failing grades. The fact of the matter is, in these schools, even in the lowest performing school, it is not 100% of the students who are failing. And when we go into these schools, nobody asks, well, 80% of these students, even if 80%, that's a number you're not even going to find often or ever. But even if you were to put yourself into a school where 80% of the students are failing, we'll just say a school with 100 students, 80 of these students are failing. Well, what's going on with the 20% of students who aren't failing? How are these 20 students in this school able to make the grade, but these other students are not? And I think that's a question that, as education administrators, as education policymakers, that has to be asked, and something that has to be examined before we move forward and get serious about making education work properly in this city. So holding our voucher schools accountable, and when we say holding voucher schools accountable, we just want some parity. We just want uniformity with the standards that our voucher schools are held to, or that our public schools are held to. We want the same for any school receiving public dollars. If you don't want the same scrutiny, then a school should not receive public funding. And that's not only my opinion; it's the opinion of the majority of voters, the majority of residents in this state. So access to higher education, and remembering the importance of our tech colleges, and the need to make sure that for the industries that need people right now, that there is no backlog for students who are looking to get into those tech college programs. So again, we have tech colleges under the job training programs and different community organizations. And another thing we were able to pass was an expansion of the transitional jobs program, which is shown to be a success in the city of Milwaukee, where people who have a hard time finding employment, whether it's they are a long-term unemployed job seeker, whether they're someone who has been incarcerated and is having trouble finding employment. And it takes those people who are looking to find employment but just can't seem to get their foot in the door, and it creates a program for subsidized employment. And the program runs for 6 months, and the goal is to transition into non-subsidized full-time employment. And the success rate is over 50%. And when you can get that type of program with over 50% of the people going into full-time non-subsidized employment, in my opinion, the opinion of many others, hopefully the opinion of yours, that is seen as a success. So guess we'll go over to the strength in Milwaukee. Uh, One of the big things that Transform Milwaukee sought to do, or not sought to do, was stated to do, that it had not, is reinvestment initiative zones, where you have specific areas that are targeted, the specific zip codes that you see that have the lowest incomes, the specific zip codes that have the lowest level of that have the lowest employment levels. It would take those those zip codes, those neighborhoods, and create a form of targeted public and private investment. It would be community and economic development, and we have bids all across the city, but this would find a way to attract more dollars, sort of almost a crowdfunding of neighborhoods of sorts, targeting specifically these high needs areas. The improved financing for housing and business development, which includes foreclosed homes, homes that need to be rehabbed, because empty, vacant homes on any block is negative in every possible way. They are magnets for crime, they are eyesores, and they are also leeches, if you will, the houses themselves, because they drain down the property, or they take down the property value of the surrounding homes. Anytime there's a foreclosure in the area, you as a neighbor are going to feel that impact. So there has to be a plan. And a colleague of mine, Representative Evan Goyke, had a wonderful plan for dealing with a lot of these foreclosures and rehabbing some of those homes and putting people to work, actually, to get some of that work done. So community-based councils that ensures a well-tailored development planning, and which is basically people in the area, residents, neighbors, who have a say-so in how dollars will be used and what are the highest needs of that area. People who actually live in the zip code, not someone who's elected from somewhere else, whether it's the city, county, or state, making the decision for them. The people who really know what's going on, the people that drive in, take the bus in, walk in, bike in, run in, however they get from their home to wherever else they go in their neighborhood or outside their neighborhood, they are the people who should have a say-so in how those funds are directed, how that money is spent, and what it's spent on. So hiring Milwaukee residents, obviously, it will be key to any sort of redevelopment. Again, we get money back into the pockets of our residents. Consumerism goes up. Our economy improves after. Millions invested to create jobs, strengthen communities, improving the city. I guess that part could have been before, because that's why I explained how the millions of dollars, or how the money would come down that will be invested. And they'll say, "Where's the money?" Well, the money was already proposed with Transform Milwaukee. It just hasn't been spent yet as it should have been. Fair employment. Fair employment was AB 755 that I worked on with Senator Dave Hansen from Green Bay. It was an amendment to the Wisconsin Fair Employment Law, which made illegal the hiring discrimination based on employment status. Once a person has been out of the workforce for 6 months, each subsequent month, that person becomes less and less employable by the standards of many employers, not only the city, state, but across the entire country. You are deemed unemployable at that point. People begin to question, people begin to scrutinize, and question why you haven't been put to work. But oddly enough, the questions aren't asked to the candidates, aren't asked to the job seekers. The question is seemingly asked into the air, and why has this person been working? And applications are disregarded. This is a fact, because I know specifically from people who have worked in HR who have said in confidence that, hey, if a person's been out of work, if they don't have work history in the last 6 months, their application is immediately disregarded. I mean, I know many times you'll see, even online, different employment postings that say the unemployed need not apply. Now, I'm not sure the last time a lot of people on this webinar have actually applied for a job. But if you just go look online, you will absolutely run into a posting that says unemployed need not apply. This sort of discrimination, this sort of deterrent should not be allowed anywhere in the country, specifically in areas where there is high unemployment. And seemingly people forget that there are so many job seekers currently that have a skill set for a missing industry, an industry that does not exist in this area anymore as it once has. We see, specifically manufacturing, it's dwindled in the past few decades. And I even spoke with a few lawmakers who own small businesses on the other side of the aisle about this bill. And some think it's a good idea, but others own businesses, and they have explicitly stated to me in person, to my face. It wasn't anything that I heard. It was something that was told to me. It said, yeah, well, if somebody hasn't been working, I question their resume and I don't look at it. Their resumes get pushed to the side. This is what's been told. This isn't even a secret. So recent unemployment, again, shouldn't be a barrier to future unemployment. Being employed should not be a prerequisite for getting a job. And breaking down unjust barriers to employment, helping the unemployed get jobs. So those are some of the bigger issues. I know I've gone far past my 30 minutes, so I want to apologize for that. But I guess this is the question-answer period. And I do see one question: where can we obtain more information on the change in focus for Transform Milwaukee? That information, we can get that to you from our office. My information is right here. If you just email my email address, and we will get that to you. We do regularly put out a newsletter. We can't right now because there's the rule that we can't do this during campaign season. We can't send out mass emails, but any information that you request, you can please send that to my office right here with this information. Definitely will be happy to get any information to you. I just don't have it on my personal computer. It is in my office, and we can get that to you as soon as possible. I want to thank everybody for joining me this evening, and this is the question and answer period, I do believe.
Do we have any more questions? If not, any questions, guys? Nope. All right, I'd like to thank Representative Barnes and let you know that this will be on our site tomorrow. You'll be able to view the whole presentation. Please do not forget to tune in next week. And Representative Mandy Wright will be with us to discuss the education outlook in Wisconsin. Representative Barnes, thank you so very much for sharing.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Tonight. It's been our pleasure. Thank you. And see you all next week.
All right, have a good one.